Hello, this is another one of my videos summarizing Alistair Parker's short introduction to the Second World War, this one being the third in the series on strategic bombing. This is chapter 10 of Parker's book. It's quite a long chapter, so that's why I've subdivided it into so many separate videos. Preparations for an Allied invasion of Northwest Europe began in April 1944, becoming a principal task of both the British RAF and the American Air Force. Spaatz and Harris, the American and British bomber barons, continued to insist on their rival strategies, but were first forced to subsume their efforts to the policies of the combined chiefs of staff, who demanded that they focus on destroying the German transport system, particularly railway marshalling yards. The Americans also made a series of audacious raids on the Romanian oil wells and storage facilities at Ploiești from the 5th of May 1944, and in the same month repeatedly attacked oil refineries and synthetic oil plants in Germany itself, incurring heavy losses of their own planes, but at significant cost in planes and pilots to the Luftwaffe. The Germans were forced to keep at least some of their diminishing air power in Germany, so that when the Allies made their invasion of Normandy in June 1944, the Germans only had 170 single-seat fighters against a combined Allied force of 10,000 aircraft. Transferring 300 aircraft from Germany to unfamiliar airfields in France was not enough to stem the Allied tide. Moreover, by this point, the Luftwaffe lacked enough well-trained pilots and crews. Goering and his staff had neglected training until it was too late, and lack of aviation fuel further limited training, as did Air Fleet commanders raiding training schools for machines and experienced crews at times of crisis. German industry was now producing more planes than the Luftwaffe could use. A good fighter pilot at this time required a year's training and at least 300 flying hours, and whilst British and American pilots got up to 400 flying hours or more, after July 1944, new German pilots averaged a mere 115 hours and often had no experience of flying up-to-date aircraft. Inadequate training resulted in a high rate of loss of planes through accidents, lack of experience in combat, and an inability to fly by instruments in bad weather. After Allied raids led to acute fuel shortages, the quality of pilots declined even further, and the German ability to defend their own fuel supplies was further weakened. Although the Germans produced some of the world's first jet aircraft, this is the Messerschmitt 262A, which could have outclassed all Allied planes of the time, there were simply not enough pilots sufficiently capable to fly them well. The success or failure of night raids increasingly depended on electronics. Although the British were now able to navigate and drop their bombs with the aid of uninterrupted electronic guidance, and so succeeded in their missions even when there was heavy cloud cover, the Germans developed techniques to locate British aircraft by picking up their electronic navigation signals, as well as the systems alerting them to German aircraft behind them and distinguishing between British and hostile aircraft. German electronic engineers also developed a new shortwave radar able to detect incoming British aircraft at 4 miles range, which was immune to existing British electronic interference. Unfortunately for them, a German aircraft equipped with the new systems mistakenly landed at a British base on the 13th of June 1944, so that the British were able to take effective evasive action and also jam the new German radar system. As the Allies advanced in France and Belgium, German early warning radar retreated, whilst Allied ground stations with the latest navigation systems came ever closer to Germany. British Bomber Command and the US Air Force were now ready to inflict catastrophic death and destruction on Germany. there were now few capable German pilots able to resist effectively, and no more large-scale victories were achieved by them. By the spring of 1945, British Bomber Command had about 1,600 planes, and the Americans in Europe over 2,000 bombers, with smaller bomb loads than the British. Between the 1st of September 1944 and the end of the war, the RAF dropped almost 400,000 tons of bombs on Germany, and the Americans about 350,000 tons. This amounted to 10 times as much as the Germans had directed at Britain throughout the entire war, including the attacks of the V-1 flying bombs and the V-2 rockets. In addition to attacks on oil and transport targets, the area bombing of cities continued, culminating in the fourth major firestorm at Dresden after the earlier destruction of Hamburg, Kassel, and Darmstadt. In January 1945, the Soviet army had launched its offensive towards eastern Germany, and the Western Allies looked for some way of helping, preferably in a way that was visible and politically useful to show both their power and their loyalty to the alliance with the Soviet Union. To this end, it was decided that whilst bombing oil plants should have the first priority, the second should go to bombing cities, where heavy attack will cause great confusion in civilian evacuation from the east and hamper movements of reinforcement from other fronts. The cities targeted were to include Berlin, Dresden, Leipzig, and Chemnitz. This was encouraged by the Deputy Chief of the Soviet Staff at Yalta on the 4th of February 1945, asking for attacks against communications to prevent the Germans moving reinforcements to the Eastern Front. The attack on Dresden was particularly deadly. It began on the night of the 13th of February with a raid of over 800 British bombers, followed by 400 American bombers on the following day and 200 more on the 15th of February. No one knows exactly how many people were killed. The initial British attack is likely to cause more deaths than any other raid during the whole of World War II. It's generally now assumed that the death figures were in the region of 22,700 to 25,000, but as I said, nobody knows for sure. This is one of a number of pictures that were taken of the bomb damage in Dresden, showing how desolated the city had become. Here's another. So next week I'll focus mostly on the British reaction to the Dresden raid, because there was considerable unease with the large number of civilians killed in that raid. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to the video, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement. Without them I wouldn't be able to make these videos. As always, you're very welcome to support my channel. Do like, comment and share on the videos if you will. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give links to Patreon and PayPal below if you want to provide practical support. Next week, as I said, we'll continue with this chapter talking about the reaction to Dresden. Have a good day.